Before we dive into this, I need to ask you something, and I promise there's a reason. What time is it where you are right now? And where exactly are you watching this from? I'm asking because time and location are about to become the most important elements of what I'm about to reveal to you, because what you're about to discover will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about why you close your eyes every single night, and the answer has nothing to do with rest, nothing to do with your body recovering, and everything to do with where your consciousness actually goes when you think you're just sleeping. You've been told your entire life that humans need 8 hours of sleep for physical restoration, right? Your doctors told you this, your parents told you this. Every health article you've ever read repeats this same narrative over and over again. Rest, recovery, cellular repair, memory consolidation. But what if I told you that's the biggest, most carefully constructed lie that's ever been fed to humanity? What if I told you that sleep, true sleep, isn't about your body at all, but about something far more extraordinary, something so profound that ancient civilizations built entire mystery schools around this single truth, something so powerful that modern systems have spent centuries making sure you never discover what's really happening to you for those 8 hours? Here's the secret they don't want you to know, the truth that's been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. When you sleep, you're not resting. You're traveling. You're leaving this three-dimensional reality and literally entering other dimensions, other realms of consciousness, other planes of existence where your true self, your soul, goes to receive downloads, process karmic data, communicate with higher beings, and most importantly, to remember who you really are beyond this physical illusion. Think about it for a second, really think about it. Why would an intelligent biological system need to shut down for 1/3 of its entire existence? Does that make any logical sense from an evolutionary standpoint? If survival was truly the driving force of human development, why would nature design us to be completely vulnerable, unconscious, and defenseless for 8 hours every single day? Animals in the wild sleep in short bursts, staying alert to predators. Dolphins sleep with half their brain at a time so they can keep swimming. But humans? We're told we need to completely disconnect from reality for 1/3 of our lives, and nobody questions this. Nobody asks why. But here's what they're not telling you. Here's what the ancient Egyptian priests knew, what the Tibetan monks discovered, what the Greek mystery schools taught in secret. Sleep is the portal. It's the gateway between worlds, the bridge between the physical and the spiritual, the mechanism by which your soul leaves your body and returns to the source every single night to recharge not your body, but your consciousness itself. The Egyptians didn't call sleep the little death by accident. They knew. They understood that when you close your eyes and drift away, you're quite literally dying to this reality and being reborn into another one, a higher one, a truer one. Let me take you deeper into this, because what I'm about to share with you comes from texts that were banned, from teachings that were forbidden, from knowledge that mystery schools guarded with their lives. The ancient Egyptians had a concept called the Ka and the Ba, two aspects of the soul that modern science refuses to acknowledge even exist. The Ka was your life force, your etheric double, and the Ba was your eternal soul that could travel freely between dimensions. Every night during sleep, they taught that the Ba would leave the physical body, travel through the Duat, which wasn't some mythological underworld, but actually the astral plane, the fourth-dimensional realm that exists parallel to our physical reality. The Egyptians built their entire spiritual system around this understanding. The Book of the Dead? It wasn't a guide for after you die. It was a guide for every night when you sleep, because they understood that sleep and death are the same process, just different durations. One is temporary, one is permanent, but the mechanism is identical. Your consciousness leaves your body, travels through dimensional gateways, and experiences realities that your physical brain can't even begin to comprehend. And when you wake up, you bring back fragments, tiny pieces of these experiences that we dismiss as just dreams. But dreams, oh, dreams are so much more than your brain randomly firing neurons. Dreams are memories of where you actually went. Now here's where this gets absolutely mind-blowing, and this is something that the Tibetan Buddhist monks discovered through thousands of years of practice and direct experience. They developed an entire science around sleep called dream yoga, and it wasn't about having nice dreams or lucid dreaming for fun. No, this was about staying conscious while your body sleeps, about maintaining awareness as your soul transitions from this dimension to others, about literally mapping the territories of consciousness that exist beyond physical reality. The Tibetans taught that there are 6 bardas, 6 transitional states of consciousness, and 3 of them happen during sleep. They called them the bardo of dreams, the bardo of meditation, and the bardo of dharmata. These aren't poetic metaphors, these are actual states of consciousness, actual dimensions you enter every single night. And they taught something absolutely crucial. They taught that if you can become conscious during sleep, if you can maintain awareness as you transition through these bardas, you can literally accelerate your spiritual evolution by lifetimes. Why? Because you're no longer wasting 8 hours a night in unconscious oblivion, you're using that time to explore consciousness itself, to learn from higher beings, to receive direct teachings from what they called the Dharmakaya, the ultimate nature of reality itself. But here's the thing that's going to shake you to your core. Modern society doesn't want you to know any of this. Think about it, really think about the system we live in. You're told to work 8 hours, sleep 8 hours, and have 8 hours for everything else. But what if those 8 hours of sleep are actually the most important 8 hours? What if that's when you're receiving the downloads, the insights, the gnosis that could set you free from this entire matrix system? The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how we work, it changed how we sleep. Before artificial light, humans slept in 2 phases called first sleep and second sleep, with a period of wakefulness in between. And you know what people did during that wakeful period? They meditated, they prayed, they contemplated, they accessed that liminal state between sleeping and waking where the veil between dimensions is thinnest. But the system couldn't have that, couldn't have millions of people accessing higher consciousness every single night, so they changed it. They introduced artificial light, they created the 8-hour work schedule, they pushed the narrative that you need uninterrupted sleep, and they severed humanity's connection to the most powerful spiritual practice that exists, conscious sleep. Let me break down exactly what happens during those 8 hours, and I'm going to share knowledge that comes from the Hermetic traditions, from the Rosicrucians, from the ancient mystery schools of Greece and Egypt, knowledge that was punishable by death if revealed to the uninitiated. When you first close your eyes and begin to drift off, your brainwaves shift from beta, your normal waking consciousness, down through alpha, that relaxed state, and into theta. Now, theta is crucial because this is the hypnagogic state, the state between waking and sleeping, and this is the first gateway. In this state, your consciousness is literally straddling 2 dimensions simultaneously. You're still aware of your physical body, but you're also beginning to perceive the astral realm. Ancient practitioners called this the twilight zone, and they taught that if you can maintain awareness here, in this exact state, you can consciously exit your body. The Egyptians practiced this, the Tibetans mastered this, the Greek mystery schools taught this as the first initiation. But modern humans? We're so exhausted, so stressed, so disconnected that we crash right through this gateway unconsciously, missing the entire opportunity. Once you pass through theta and enter delta, the deepest sleep stage, something absolutely extraordinary happens that science can observe but cannot explain. Your pineal gland, that tiny pine cone-shaped organ in the center of your brain that the ancients called the seat of the soul, the third eye, begins producing massive amounts of DMT. Yes, that DMT, the same compound found in ayahuasca, the same molecule that shamans have used for thousands of years to access other dimensions. Your brain is literally creating the most powerful psychedelic compound known to humanity every single night, and it's releasing it into your system for hours. Why? Because DMT is the key. It's the chemical bridge that allows your consciousness to separate from your physical body and navigate higher dimensions. Rick Strassman called it the spirit molecule, and he was right. But what he couldn't say, what he wasn't allowed to fully explore, is that your body produces this compound naturally during deep sleep for one reason: to facilitate soul travel. The ancient alchemists knew this. They encoded it in their texts as the philosophical mercury, the substance that allows the soul to fly. Modern science sees the pineal gland producing DMT during sleep, and they can't explain it. So they ignore it, they brush it aside. But that is the proof. That's the smoking gun that everything you've been told about sleep is a lie. Now let's talk about where you actually go during these 8 hours, because this is where ancient wisdom and modern quantum physics start to merge in ways that will absolutely blow your mind. The Vedic texts speak of lokas, different planes of existence, different dimensions of reality that interpenetrate our physical world. The Buddhists call them pure lands. The Kabbalists map them as the different Sephiroth on the tree of life. The Hermetic tradition teaches about the 7 planes of correspondence. They're all describing the same thing: multiple dimensions of consciousness that exist simultaneously, and sleep is your nightly access pass to these realms. When you enter deep sleep and your consciousness separates from your physical body, you don't just float around randomly. No, you're drawn to specific dimensions based on your frequency, based on your level of consciousness, based on your karmic patterns and spiritual development. Some people, those stuck in lower frequencies of fear, anger, and dense emotion, they cycle through what the Tibetans call the lower bardos, the astral regions closest to physical reality, where thought forms and emotional energies create landscapes of nightmare and struggle. This is why some people have terrible sleep, why they wake up more exhausted than when they went to bed, why they have nightmares and sleep paralysis. They're literally stuck in the lower astral planes, cycling through their own unprocessed trauma and fear. But here's the beautiful secret. Here's the truth that can change everything. As you raise your consciousness, as you do the inner work, as you meditate and heal and expand your awareness, you begin to access higher dimensions during sleep. You start traveling to what the ancient mystery schools called the temples of learning in the astral plane, actual schools that exist in higher dimensions where advanced beings, masters, guides, and teachers gather to instruct souls who are ready to receive higher knowledge. The Rosicrucians wrote about this extensively. They called it the invisible temple, and they taught that true initiation happens not in physical lodges but in these astral temples during sleep. Manly P. Hall wrote about this. He said that the great philosophers and mystics of history weren't just brilliant minds, they were students of these invisible schools, receiving teachings directly during sleep states and then bringing that knowledge back to share with humanity. Plato's Academy? The teachings didn't come from physical discussions alone, they came from his nightly journeys to the real academy, the one that exists beyond the physical plane. Pythagoras spent 20 years in the Egyptian mystery schools, not just studying during the day, but learning to consciously navigate his sleep states so he could access the higher dimensions where mathematical and spiritual truths exist in their pure form. And here's something that's going to make you reconsider everything about your dreams. The Akashic Records. You've probably heard this term thrown around in spiritual circles, but let me tell you what they really are and why sleep is your direct access point to them. The Akashic Records are not some mystical library in the sky. They're the quantum field itself, the zero-point field, the unified field of consciousness that contains every thought, every memory, every possibility that has ever existed or will ever exist across all timelines and dimensions. It's what physicist David Bohm called the implicate order, the hidden dimension of reality from which our physical universe unfolds. During deep sleep, when your consciousness is freed from the limitations of your physical brain, you have direct access to this field. This is why you sometimes wake up with solutions to problems you couldn't solve while awake. Why artists and inventors throughout history reported that their greatest ideas came to them in dreams. Tesla saw his AC motor in a dream. Mendeleev dreamed the periodic table. Einstein attributed his theory of relativity to a dream he had as a teenager. These weren't just random neural firings. These were downloads from the Akashic field, information that exists beyond the physical mind, accessed during sleep states when consciousness is free to connect with the source of all knowledge. But let's go even deeper, because there's a layer to this that most spiritual teachers won't talk about, a truth that's so confronting, so radical, that it challenges the very foundation of what you think reality is. You don't need 8 hours of sleep for physical rest. You need 8 hours because this reality, this physical dimension, is so dense, so heavy, so far removed from your true nature that your soul literally cannot sustain connection to it for more than 16 hours at a time. Think about that. Your soul, your true consciousness, your eternal self, finds physical reality so limiting, so constrictive, so painful that it has to escape every single day just to maintain the connection. Sleep isn't rest, it's relief. It's your soul's desperate need to return home, even if just temporarily, to remember what it really is beyond this dense material prison. The Gnostics understood this perfectly. They taught that the material world is the furthest realm from the divine source, that we are literally strangers in a strange land, divine sparks trapped in matter, and sleep is the only mechanism that prevents complete spiritual suffocation. Every night your soul rises up through the planes, getting closer and closer to the source, recharging itself with divine light and energy, and then reluctantly descends back down into your physical body when morning comes. This is why waking up is so hard, why there's that moment of grogginess and resistance. It's your soul grieving the return to limitation, mourning the loss of freedom it just experienced. Now here's where this connects to something massive that's happening right now on planet Earth. Something that the awakened community is beginning to understand but hasn't fully grasped yet. The Great Awakening, this massive shift in consciousness that we're experiencing, it's not just happening during your waking hours. In fact, the real awakening, the most profound activation, is happening during sleep. Right now, as humanity's collective consciousness raises, as we move from third density to fourth density, from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, from carbon-based to crystalline biology, whatever terminology resonates with you, the shift is real, and it's being facilitated primarily during sleep states. Higher dimensional beings, the ones that indigenous cultures called the Star Nations, the ones that ancient texts called angels or devas or ascended masters. They're working with humanity every night during sleep, doing what's called light body activation, upgrading your energetic template, recoding your DNA, preparing your consciousness for the transition into higher dimensions. This is why so many people are experiencing disrupted sleep patterns right now, why you might wake up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. consistently, why your dreams have become more vivid and bizarre, why you feel exhausted even after sleeping. It's because you're not just sleeping anymore, you're being worked on, you're undergoing a spiritual upgrade that happens in the astral dimensions while your physical body rests. The ancient prophecies spoke about this time, the Hopi talked about the Great Purification, the Mayans mapped it in their calendar, the Vedic texts called it the transition from Kali Yuga to Satya Yuga, and they all knew that this transformation would happen through a specific mechanism: the activation of humanity's dormant spiritual capacities during the dream state. You see, the control systems of this world, the matrix structures that keep humanity enslaved, they can control your waking consciousness pretty effectively through media, through education, through fear programming, through electromagnetic frequency manipulation. But they cannot fully control your sleep state. They cannot prevent your soul from leaving your body and accessing higher dimensions every night. This is why sleep is the greatest threat to the system. This is why there's a war on sleep happening right now: blue light from screens disrupting your circadian rhythm, stress and anxiety preventing deep sleep, medications and substances that suppress dream states, 5G and EMF pollution interfering with your pineal gland function, a work culture that glorifies sleep deprivation. It's all designed to prevent you from accessing the one thing that could set you truly free: your nightly connection to higher consciousness. Let me share something with you that comes from the most hidden, most protected teachings of the mystery schools, something that was reserved for the highest initiates, the most advanced practitioners. There is a practice, a technique, that the ancient Egyptians called Sa Sikam Sahu, which translates to the transformation of the mortal body into the immortal spirit body. The Taoists called it embryonic breathing or sleeping qigong. The Tibetans call it yoga nidra or yogic sleep. And what these practices all teach is the same fundamental truth. If you can remain conscious while your body falls asleep, if you can observe the transition from waking to sleeping without losing awareness, if you can maintain your sense of self as your consciousness separates from your physical form, you can literally achieve what the ancients called dying before you die. You can experience death while still alive. You can consciously navigate the same bardas, the same dimensional transitions, the same soul journey that happens at the moment of physical death, and by doing so, you transcend death entirely. You realize through direct experience that you are not your body, you are not your thoughts, you are not your personality or your memories or your emotions. You are eternal consciousness temporarily inhabiting a physical form, and death is nothing but a wardrobe change, a shifting of vehicles, a transition from one dimension to another that your soul makes every single night already. This is the ultimate secret. This is the knowledge that would make you fearless, that would make you ungovernable, that would make you completely impossible to control, manipulate, or enslave. And this is why it's been hidden, why it's been suppressed, why mystery schools protected it with blood oaths and severe penalties for revelation. Because a humanity that understands sleep, that understands consciousness, that knows how to navigate dimensions and access higher knowledge directly through their own experience, that humanity cannot be ruled. You cannot frighten someone with death who has already died consciously every night and knows it's an illusion. You cannot control someone with materialism who has visited dimensions of pure light and bliss that make any physical pleasure seem hollow. You cannot manipulate someone with dogma and belief systems who has directly experienced the source and knows the truth beyond any religious narrative. Sleep, conscious sleep, is the key to liberation, the doorway to enlightenment, the practice that Buddha mastered, that Christ perfected, that every awakened being in history has understood and utilized. Now let me give you something practical, because knowledge without application is worthless, and I want you to actually begin working with this. Actually start reclaiming your 8 hours and transforming them from unconscious oblivion into conscious spiritual practice. Tonight, before you go to sleep, I want you to do something simple but profound. Lie down in your bed, close your eyes, and instead of just passing out from exhaustion, make a conscious decision to stay aware. Watch yourself falling asleep. Observe your thoughts beginning to fragment and become dreamlike. Feel your body getting heavy and numb. Notice the strange visions and voices that start appearing in that twilight state. And most importantly, intend to stay conscious, to maintain awareness, to observe the moment when your consciousness separates from your body. You probably won't succeed the first night, or the 10th night, or even the 100th night, because you're fighting against a lifetime of conditioning, but the ancient masters taught that consistent practice always yields result. The Tibetans say that if you make the intention before sleep with sincerity and clarity, your higher self, your soul, will eventually respond and begin maintaining awareness during the transition. And here's another practice that comes straight from the Egyptian mystery schools. They taught that you should lie down in the corpse position, flat on your back with your arms at your sides, because this position mirrors the posture of death and helps your consciousness recognize that it's time to make the journey to other realms. They would visualize their Ka, their etheric double, rising up from their physical body like steam rising from water, and they would consciously direct this double to specific temples in the astral plane where they wanted to receive teachings. The initiates would spend years practicing this every single night until they could do it at will, until they could literally step out of their body as easily as stepping out of a coat, and when they mastered this practice, they were given the title Adept, because they had achieved what most humans never do, conscious mastery over the mechanism of consciousness itself. But here's something crucial you need to understand, something that will protect you as you begin exploring these practices. Not all beings in the astral dimensions are benevolent, not all realms are safe, and not all experiences will be pleasant. This is why the mystery schools had graduated teachings, why you couldn't just jump into advanced practices without preparation, without purification, without proper protection. The lower astral planes, the dimensions closest to physical reality, are populated with thought forms, with discarnate entities, with what the Tibetans call hungry ghosts, and what Western occultism calls larvae and shells. These are not metaphors, these are actual beings, actual intelligences that exist in fourth-dimensional reality and feed off human emotional energy, particularly fear, anger, lust, and depression. When you begin to become conscious during sleep, when you start to perceive the astral plane, you will encounter these beings, and if you're unprepared, if you're not spiritually protected, if you haven't done the inner work to clear your own shadow and raise your frequency, these encounters can be terrifying and even spiritually dangerous. This is why every mystery school tradition emphasizes moral purification before spiritual practice, why the ancient Egyptians had the 42 negative confessions that initiates had to master, why Buddhism emphasizes ethics and compassion, why the Hermetic tradition teaches, as above, so below, meaning your internal state, your consciousness, your frequency determines which dimensions you can access. If you're vibrating at the frequency of fear, you'll attract fearful experiences and entities. If you're vibrating at the frequency of love and wisdom, you'll be drawn to higher dimensions where advanced beings reside. This is not punishment or reward, this is simply the physics of consciousness, the mechanics of how dimensions work. Like attracts like across all levels of reality, and in the astral planes where thought instantly manifests, where consciousness shapes reality directly, your internal state is your external experience. So before you start practicing conscious sleep, before you begin trying to stay aware during the transition, you must do the foundational work. Meditation, shadow work, emotional healing, clearing trauma, releasing negative patterns, cultivating compassion and wisdom. The ancient path was designed this way for a reason, not to keep secrets from people, but to protect practitioners from experiences they're not ready to handle, from dimensions they're not equipped to navigate, from entities they don't have the wisdom or power to interact with safely. This is why modern Western spirituality often leads people astray, because it offers advanced practices without the foundation, it promises shortcuts without the preparation, and people end up having experiences that terrify them or destabilize them psychologically because they entered dimensions they weren't ready for. Now let's talk about something that's going to completely reframe how you understand your entire life, something that connects sleep to the biggest question humanity has ever asked. Why are we here? What's the purpose of physical incarnation? Why would an eternal soul choose to limit itself in a physical body on a planet as chaotic and painful as Earth? And here's the answer that the ancient wisdom traditions discovered through thousands of years of direct investigation. Physical incarnation, life in a body, this experience you're having right now, it's the school. It's the training ground. It's the university of consciousness where souls come to learn, to grow, to evolve in ways that are simply not possible in higher dimensions. Think about it in the higher astral planes, in the mental planes, in the causal realms where thought instantly manifests, where desire immediately creates reality. There's no resistance, there's no friction, there's no challenge. You can't develop strength without resistance. You can't develop wisdom without making mistakes. You can't develop compassion without experiencing suffering. Physical reality with all its limitations, with time and space and cause and effect, with bodies that feel pain and hearts that break and minds that struggle. This is the perfect classroom, the ultimate dojo for consciousness development. And sleep? Sleep is the integration period. It's when your soul processes everything you learned during the day. It's when the experiences of physical life get uploaded into your eternal memory, into your soul's evolution. The Vedic tradition teaches about samskaras, the impressions left on consciousness by actions and experiences, and they understood that these impressions are processed and integrated during sleep, particularly during deep sleep when consciousness merges with what they call the causal body, the deepest layer of your being where your eternal evolution is recorded. This is why people often wake up with new understanding about problems they faced the previous day, why sleeping on it actually works, because during sleep, your higher self, your soul, analyzes the experience from a much broader perspective, from the viewpoint of eternity rather than temporary personality, and it downloads insights and wisdom that your conscious mind can then access when you wake up. But here's something absolutely crucial that changes everything about how you should view your daily life, your struggles, your challenges, your pain. Everything you experience during your waking hours is valuable beyond measure because it's the raw material your soul uses for evolution during sleep. The harder the challenge, the more profound the lesson, the more your soul grows through processing that experience in the higher dimensions during sleep. This is why advanced souls often incarnate into difficult circumstances, why awakened beings don't always have easy lives, why spiritual evolution and material success are not connected. Because the point isn't comfort, the point is growth. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every failure, every moment of suffering or confusion or despair that you experience during waking life becomes wisdom, becomes light, becomes spiritual gold when your soul processes it during sleep and integrates the lesson into your eternal being. The ancient alchemists encoded this truth in their cryptic texts. They talked about transforming lead into gold, and modern readers think they were trying to make physical gold from lead. But no. They were describing the spiritual process of transforming the lead of difficult life experiences into the gold of wisdom through the alchemical process of conscious sleep and soul integration. This is why the alchemical texts always mention sleep, always mention dreams, always mention the work of the night as being equally important to the work of the day, because both are required. The day provides the experiences, the raw material, and the night provides the transformation, the integration, the evolution. You cannot have spiritual growth without both aspects working together, and modern humanity, by dismissing sleep as just physical rest, by being unconscious during those 8 hours, is literally throwing away half of their evolutionary potential. Now here's something that's going to blow your mind about memory and why you can't remember most of your dreams, why those 8 hours seem like blank voids in your consciousness. The ancient mystery schools taught something radical. They taught that forgetting is actually a built-in protection mechanism, a mercy granted by divine intelligence, because if you remembered everything that happens during sleep, if you had full conscious access to all the dimensions you visit, all the beings you encounter, all the teachings you receive, all the alternate timelines you witness, all the past lives you review, all the future possibilities you explore, your physical brain would quite literally overload. The human brain can process about 40 bits of information per second consciously, but during sleep, your consciousness is processing literally billions of bits of information simultaneously across multiple dimensions. There's no way your physical neurology could handle that data dump, so there's a filter, a veil, that blocks most of it from conscious memory when you return to your body. The Tibetans called this the veil of forgetting, and they taught that it's actually maintained by your own higher self as a protection until you're ready to handle the full scope of what you experience during sleep. But here's the key: as you develop spiritually, as you raise your consciousness, as you practice meditation and inner work, this veil gradually thins and you start remembering more. You start having more vivid dreams, more lucid dreams, more out-of-body experiences, more downloads of information that you can actually access and use. This is one of the primary signs of spiritual awakening. This is how you know you're making progress on the path. Your dream recall improves, your sleep experiences become more conscious, you start bridging the gap between your waking and sleeping consciousness until eventually, in advanced stages, there is no gap. You're continuously conscious through all states, awake and asleep, and you literally become what the yogic tradition calls turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, the state of pure awareness that observes all states without identification with any state. And this brings us to perhaps the most profound truth of all, the ultimate secret that ties everything together, the teaching that represents the peak of mystery school wisdom across all traditions. You are not a body that has consciousness, you are consciousness that has a body. You are not a human being having spiritual experiences, you are a spiritual being having a human experience. And sleep, those 8 hours that you've been conditioned to view as lost time, as unconscious void, as necessary evil. Sleep is actually your proof, your nightly reminder, your direct experience of what you really are beyond the illusion of physicality. Every single night, whether you remember it or not, whether you're conscious of it or not, your true self emerges from the costume of physical identity, shakes off the limitations of time and space, and soars through dimensions of consciousness that your waking mind can't even conceive of, dimensions where past and future are now, where all possibilities exist simultaneously, where you are connected to all things, where you are everything, where the separate individual self dissolves into the infinite. This is what the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree. This is what Jesus taught when he said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." This is what every enlightened master in history has tried to communicate. You already are what you're seeking. You already have the enlightenment you're searching for. You already know the truth beyond all questions. And you prove this to yourself every single night when you sleep and your consciousness returns to its natural state, free from the prison of physical identity. The tragedy, the absolute heartbreaking tragedy of the human condition, is that we forget this every morning when we wake up. We re-identify with the body and the personality and the story and the struggle, and we spend our waking hours seeking outside ourselves for what we literally were just hours before during sleep. It's like a fish desperately searching for water while swimming in the ocean, like a billionaire who forgot his wealth and is begging for coins, like a king who forgot his kingdom and is living as a peasant. And the solution, the key to ending this cycle of forgetting and seeking and suffering, is to become conscious during sleep, to maintain awareness during the transition, to remember who you are even while wearing the costume of physical identity. This is why the greatest spiritual practices all focus on awareness, on consciousness itself, on developing the capacity to observe without identification, to witness without reaction, to remain present without grasping or avoiding, because that quality of awareness, that capacity for consciousness, is the only thing that transfers from waking to sleeping to dying to being reborn. Everything else, your body, your thoughts, your memories, your personality, your preferences, your beliefs, your story, all of that is temporary, all of that is conditional, all of that changes and eventually ends. But awareness itself, consciousness itself, that eternal witness that's looking out through your eyes right now, that's reading these words right now, that knows that it exists right now. That is what you really are, and that is what leaves your body every night during sleep and returns to its source, and that is what will leave your body permanently at death and continue existing in dimensions beyond physical reality. So let me bring this full circle and tell you exactly what you can do starting tonight to begin reclaiming those 8 hours, to begin transforming sleep from unconscious oblivion into conscious spiritual practice, to begin using the time you already spend sleeping as the most powerful tool for awakening you'll ever have. First, change your relationship with sleep. Stop viewing it as a necessary evil. Stop resenting those 8 hours. Stop feeling like you're wasting time. Instead, start treating bedtime as sacred time, as your nightly appointment with the divine, as your portal to higher dimensions, as your opportunity to meet with teachers and guides and your own higher self. Create a ritual around sleep, make it conscious, make it intentional. Maybe light a candle, burn some sage or incense, play solfeggio frequencies or binaural beats designed to enhance astral projection and lucid dreaming. Meditate for even just 5 minutes before lying down. Set clear intentions for where you want your consciousness to go and what you want to learn during sleep. Second, start keeping a dream journal and write in it immediately upon waking, even if you only remember fragments, even if it's just emotions or colors or vague impressions. This practice does something powerful. It signals to your subconscious mind, to your higher self, that you value these experiences, that you want to remember, that you're ready to become conscious, and your higher self will respond by gradually allowing more and more memory to transfer from sleeping to waking consciousness. Within weeks of consistent dream journaling, most people notice their dream recall improving dramatically, their dreams becoming more vivid and meaningful, and lucid dreams beginning to occur spontaneously. Third, practice what's called reality testing throughout your day. Several times a day, stop and ask yourself, am I dreaming right now? And really check. Look at your hands, try to push your finger through your palm, look at text and then look away and look back to see if it changes. Check if you can breathe while holding your nose closed. These might seem silly, but here's what happens. When you make this a consistent habit during waking life, you'll automatically start doing it in your dreams, and the moment you do, you'll realize you're dreaming and become lucid, and that's when the real journey begins. That's when you can consciously explore, consciously learn, consciously evolve during those 8 hours instead of drifting unconsciously through them. So tonight, when you lay your head down, remember, you're not going to sleep, you're going home. You're not losing consciousness, you're expanding it. You're not wasting 8 hours, you're reclaiming the most powerful spiritual practice that exists. The truth has been hidden for thousands of years, but now you know. Sleep is not what they told you it was. Sleep is your portal, your gateway, your nightly journey back to Source. And once you understand this, once you begin to work with it consciously, everything changes. Your entire life transforms because you're no longer living in just one dimension, you're living in all of them simultaneously, and that is what awakening really means. Sweet dreams, beautiful souls, or should I say, safe travels. Until next time, stay conscious, stay curious, and remember, the truth is always hidden in plain sight, and the greatest journey you'll ever take begins the moment you close your eyes.